Yeah, so in the absence of the chair, the village clerk needs to call roll and then ask for a motion to elect a chair pro tem,
Okay.
which
So I'll
historically
call
has
the
been a
roll
long,
first.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So
Just call the
trustee
roll.
Brienne,
Here.
trustee Inkeman. Trustee Markey.
Here.
Trustee Rappin.
Here.
Trustee Ryder.
Here.
So is there a motion?
Is there a motion to have trustee Inkeman act on behalf of President Charlot's behalf for this meeting?
I move that trustee Ankerman work on behalf of President Charlo for this meeting. Second.
Voice vote.
Voice vote.
So you say all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Administratively, there are some things we have to do, as I'm taking the place of Regis this evening. So we've done our roll call. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd stand with me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First on the agenda, we have a proclamation designated October 2022 as Fire Prevention Month. Whereas in 2021, U.S. fire departments responded to 1,400,000 fires, or one fire every 23 seconds. And whereas nationwide, there were 3,500 fire deaths, or one every 160 minutes. And whereas property loss resulting from fire during the same period totaled in excess of $15.6 billion. And whereas an enlightened and supported citizenry can be effective in reducing both loss of life and property damage resulting from fire. And whereas the Village of Lake Bluff is committed to protecting its citizens from fire losses. And whereas the Village of Lake Bluff is served by an all-volunteer fire department which works with its residents to promote fire safety. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the village president of the Village of Lake Bluff, County of Lake, and State of Illinois, we hereby proclaim October 2022 Fire Prevention Month in the Village of Lake Bluff. Lake Bluff residents are encouraged to change the batteries in their home smoke detectors, form a fire escape plan for their home, and participate in continuing information and educational activities of the Lake Bluff Fire Department during Fire Prevention Month and throughout the year, and to practice fire safety and prevention on a continuing basis. Proclaimed this 26th day, September 2022. Next, we have consideration of the minutes of the September 12th, 2022 Village Board meeting and the August 29th, 2022 Board of Trustees and Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals Special Joint Workshop. Do I have a motion for approval of these minutes?
So moved.
So moved by trustee Buron. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Ryder.
And I just wanted to point out that includes those,
Oh, that's right. We have
Typos that were
some
handed out
informational updates, included some typographical errors. Are there any further changes or corrections in addition to what was provided in the packet? Okay, hearing none. Voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, if we have any non-agenda items or visitors, the village president and the Board of Trustees allocate 15 minutes in this meeting for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the board on any matter that is not listed on this evening's agenda. So each person addressing the Village Board of Trustees is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. And we do have a number of people in the audience this evening. If anyone in the audience is interested in addressing the board for an item not on this evening's agenda, this is your opportunity to step forward. I don't see anybody. In our virtual attendance, do we have anyone who is interested in participating?
if anybody's participating in the village's Zoom meeting, please raise your hand at this time and you'll be recognized and given an opportunity to speak. No one has raised their hand.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to setting the order of this evening's meeting. The village president and the board of trustees will entertain requests from anyone present on the order of the business to be conducted during this evening's meeting. And I see that we do have a number of people in the audience, and perhaps we, if there are no objections, might we move 15, which is the amending the ordinance
14. I'm sorry. You're
So
right, you're right.
15 first, right?
Yep.
And then, which is the Lake Bluff zoning regulations relating to parking in the central business district. Then next, item 16, which is an ordinance granting a special use permit for an eating place without a drive-through facility, which is Hansa. And next is the second reading of an ordinance granting Rio Development Plan and site plan approval for a sanitary sewer pumping station. And then finally, item 8C, which is of the Village Administrator's Report, I wanted to move ahead the informational report for Lake Bluff Open Lands Association. So that's a mouthful. Does anyone object to moving forward any of those items? Okay, so is this a voice vote, or we can just go ahead and do that?
So without objection?
All right, without objection, we will go ahead and do that. So the first item that we would be looking at is
Number 15.
number 15 agenda item. So this is an ordinance amending the Lake Bluff zoning regulations relating to parking in the central business district. This is the first of two board items related to a pending zoning relief application concerning Hansa Coffee Roasters. As described in the attached PCZBA staff memorandum, the attached draft ordinance is proposed by staff and rewrites certain provisions of the village's downtown parking requirements in order to simplify them. The current provisions are duplicative and add additional procedural complexity for property owners and tenants. The new provisions clarify the village's intent that most changes in use do not trigger a requirement to provide additional parking, which cannot practically be provided, and extends the requirement that employees park in the train station parking lot to all new businesses, unless their building provides an adequate amount of parking. The village retains the ability to require more parking on a case-by-case basis in connection with a special use permit or variation. Now, at its September 21st, 2022 meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing and unanimously recommended that the village board adopt the attached ordinance. Do I have a motion to consider this?
So moved.
So moved by trustee Markey. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by trustee Ryder. Any comments or discussion regarding this? These ordinance changes?
Drew, I'm just curious what the genesis of this was what prompted this?
It's occurred from time to time, very frustrating to property owners in the town where the village has previously granted zoning approvals to improve the redevelopment of an entire block and already granting zoning variations for parking for that. So it's an unnecessary step, especially when the village has controlled most uses via, intense uses via special use permit. The village always has that ability to control those and add conditions at those time of approval. So it was unnecessarily cumbersome kind of look, and the village thought it could probably, do away with at least one hurdle for the business community in going through this process, especially when it was very limited ability for these property owners to provide any additional relief on site.
Which is true. I mean, I'm thinking back to, like Gary Lawrence's project.
Exactly.
And that was, I guess my question though is, with that in mind, we are not asking less of anyone if we anticipate that their business, that's still gotta be the what's weighed, right, is how much more traffic a business may generate with this very finite number of, and that was really what came up with Gary's project, was he anticipated more, but he was willing to make some concessions to add spaces. He's in a particular position to do that, but that's really
Probably the last time though, right?
probably,
Yep.
right. So that's the question, is if anybody else asks for that, they're really not, there isn't anything else to give, is there?
Short of acquiring adjacent properties and tearing down, right, but
Or-
at the same time, the village still has the ability through those, where in that case, there's a special use permit for the restaurant or for other intense-like uses that
Yeah.
get scrutinized and go through a process, and the village has an opportunity to weigh in to say, is it possible, is it, so.
Yeah. And then I think the part is that people probably talk about a lot is enforcement of the, now that's separate, but in terms of the train station, I just don't know how, I guess that's a good faith thing, isn't it?
It's, the consequences can be dire if they don't follow through. They could lose their zoning relief.
Okay.
So that's been helpful from time to time. The village has had to point it out to certain users that, hey, your employees are clearly using on-street parking and you're putting this special use permit at risk.
Right.
That's
And
changed
they know
behavior
that up
quickly.
front. I mean, that's part of the
Yes.
application
Yeah.
process. So it's not like that comes back around and is any surprise. Everyone gets that right up front.
Yes.
Good. Right.
Any more comments or questions regarding this?
I have a question about the practical effect of the parking requirement in the metro station lot. Employees are typically there for more than 2 hours, right? So in order for them to park legally, they either have to move, if they don't have that obligation, because they've applied earlier, there's been no change to they've had no need for a permit, building permit, then the employees are parking for more than 2 hours on the street, right? I guess my question is, isn't there already an incentive for anybody staying downtown for longer than 2 hours to park on the street? And does that change, or park at the lot, and does this change that?
It requires it. And so the idea, one, merchants generally should and do want to keep on-street parking for customers.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
First and foremost. But the village has a program where we issue CBD businesses and their employees CBD permits at a very small fee
I see,
that they then can get a hang tag and they can legally park in the train station,
I see. Even if they're not required to do so?
even if they're not
If they're
required.
sort of
We encourage them to do
grandfathered.
that, yes.
Okay, good. I get it. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is a roll call vote. Oh, thank you. Do we have any comments from the public regarding this? Is there anyone raising their hand online?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, this is a roll call vote. Clerk?
It's voice votes, first reading.
Okay.
Sorry for the memo
That's okay.
typo.
Typo one. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes first reading. All right. Next is Agenda Item 16, which is an ordinance granting a special use permit for an eating place without a drive-through facility. That's for Hansa Coffee at 24 East Scranton Avenue. This is the first reading. So this is the second of the two board items relating to a pending zoning relief application for Hansa Coffee Roasters. On September 5th, 2022, the Village of Lake Bluff received a zoning relief application from Lake Effect Holdings, LLC. The application proposes that Lake Effect's tenant, Hansa Coffee Roasters Limited, will relocate within the same building from their 600 Walnut Avenue space in the rear to the 24 East Scranton Avenue tenant space in the front. This tenant space was previously occupied by Wisma and B Market, both carry-out food retailers, and has been vacant since May of 2022. The two affected tenants' spaces are approximately equal in square footage. At its September 21st, 2022 meeting, the PCZBA conducted a public hearing and unanimously, 6-0, recommended that the village board adopt the attached ordinance, which would grant a special use permit to Hansa for their new space and revoke their existing special use permit after the move is complete. The special use permit includes conditions that have been commonly applied to other businesses in the Central Business District concerning hours of operation, employee parking at the Lake Bluff train station, and a pathway for the village board to approve changes to Hansa's hours of operation and floor plan without a subsequent public hearing. As the zoning regulations exist today, Hansa's proposed relocation triggers the requirement to provide additional off-street parking stalls. This requirement would be eliminated by the text amendment and also under consideration by the board this evening, which we discussed. However, if Hansa's special use permit is approved before or without adopting this text amendment, Hansa will additionally require a variation from this parking requirement in order to relocate. The PCZBA also considered this variation and unanimously, 6-0, recommended that the village board grant the variation if necessary. The attached ordinance does not currently grant the variation, but this language can be added prior to second reading if desired. Do I have a motion for this ordinance?
So moved.
So moved by trustee Rappin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Markey. Are there any comments from the board, questions? Anyone in the audience have questions or comments? And finally, online, are there any
No, ma'am.
participants?
There are participants. No one's appearing to raise their hand to comment on this item.
Okay. Hearing none, this says it's a roll call.
Does she need to be called in this vote as well?
On the first
Sec-
reading,
That's for,
I believe it's a roll call vote.
It says roll call, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so it's a
because
roll.
it's actually granted the special use permit.
well, it's its first reading though, is it not? So she actually a voice vote on this.
Oh, it's first, yes,
So-
yeah, sorry, voice vote on the first reading. I too was distracted by the.
Got it. So
Voice vote, first
it's a
reading.
voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries. All right,
Second reading will be 2 weeks from tonight.
second reading will be 2 weeks from tonight. Okay, we are on to agenda item 14, which is the second reading of an ordinance granting Rio Development Plan and site plan approval for a sanitary sewer pumping station at 503 Sunrise Beach. The NSWRD and the village are jointly applying to authorize the construction of a 1 million gallon detention basin for sanitary sewage at the NSWRD's facility or pumping station located upon a village-owned parcel that forms part of Sunrise Beach at the toe of the Bluff along Lake Michigan. The detention basin will prevent sanitary sewage from overflowing into Lake Michigan in the event of an emergency, which has happened at least 10 times over the last 20 years. The basin will allow NSWRD to perform additional planned maintenance as well. Under the village's RIO, which is Recreational, Institutional, and Open Space Zoning Rules, this work is subject to a RIO development plan. This is essentially a RIO-specific plan development tool, similar to the village's planned residential, commercial, and mixed-use development tools. Under this process, the PCZBA and the ABR engaged in a coordinated review of the proposal, a RIO development plan, and the village board may now act jointly on both recommendations in the form of a single unified ordinance. The PCZBA conducted its review on August 31st and unanimously recommended its approval. The ABR conducted its review on September 6th and unanimously recommended approval as well. The village board gave first reading approval at its September 12th meeting, and all these approvals were subject to a number of conditions, which are listed in the packet. The first reading approval, the NSWRD has submitted a revised set of plans that incorporates the conditions that were shown as a result of the September 12th meeting. Village staff has also added language to the draft ordinance, which was shown in red line, to address these certain conditions. So at this time, do we have a motion to consider this ordinance?
So moved.
So moved by trustee Markey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Briand. At this point in time, do we have any questions or concerns from the board? Again, this is, yeah.
I just want to point out, I had a conversation earlier today with trustee Ryder. She pointed out that there was a inconsistency with the recital in the ordinance distinguishing that this approval deals with a portion of the property, and that did not carry over to the Exhibit C, which is the, has similar language. It did not exactly match, and we'll clean that up. So thank you for pointing that out.
That's great. Any other further comments or questions? Anyone online or in the room? Thank you. Please come forward. State your name.
Hi, my name is Bill Herman. I live at 516 East Center Avenue. I had gone to the ABR meeting to try and push for a couple changes, and something that was discussed at the ABR meeting was increasing the height of the fence that's visible when walking down the road to the beach, and I've taken a couple pictures and included those here. This is sort of what I'll call the seventh grade science project portion of this installation. Neil Dahlman expressed, he said, everybody else seemed to agree with this at the ABR on increasing the height of the fence, so you don't have to see all this stuff that's on the wall here. But Neil Dahlman said he didn't think it was gonna help because people walking down the hill are still gonna be able to see over the fence from some point on the hill. I took a picture of the first place where this stuff is visible coming down the hill, which is probably about halfway down from where the steps come down from center. And if the fence height was extended here from this point, because the trees block the view prior to this, it would effectively block all of these things from the view. Now, something that is in the packet, it says that the conditions recommended by the ABR are to relocate all exposed conduit and wiring as much as possible. So I don't really know what that means. It's kind of vague. And, there's a lot of exposed conduit and wiring on this wall. So does that mean this is going away? I don't really know, but I think that it should go away, and I think that the height of the fence, if it's not gonna go away, should be extended so that it's no longer viewable to people coming down the hill. I mean, I'm not really sure why, if you're gonna put a 6-foot fence in to block some of it, you wouldn't put an 8 or 9-foot fence in to block all of it. And so that's kind of my main concern coming to address this board today. And also, I think the ordinance has some things that, need to be tightened up. I shared some revisions to the ordinance with Drew regarding the use of the detention basin and with Member Ryder, and, the NSWRD needs to provide notice to the village of a planned or unplanned use of the basin. I think they need to provide advance notice of a planned use. And, it says that they're gonna utilize a system to clean the detention basin following each event where the detention basin is used to detain sanitary sewage. I think that needs a little bit more sort of oversight. I mean, okay, they're gonna clean it to whose specifications, to whose satisfaction, right? I think it should say to industry specifications and to this reasonable satisfaction of the village, because otherwise it's meaningless. There's a lot of language in this ordinance that's sort of completely meaningless without any sort of second step teeth to it. So I would propose those things. I don't know if Drew circulated this language to the rest of you, but there's also, an issue with respect to another overflow, and if that overflow is used, there needs to be notice of the use of that. NSWRD needs to clean it up. That doesn't seem to be addressed here. I understand there's supposed to be some sort of memorandum of understanding that's going to be put in place. I'm not really sure what that means. This ordinance is being adopted by the village. It's being agreed to by NSWRDs. To me, that seems to have the force of law, where it could be enforced in court. A memorandum of understanding, I'm not exactly sure what that means, or how enforceable that document would be if there was found to be a violation and somebody wanted, the village had to do something about it. So those are my suggestions, and I really hope that this will be acted upon. Overall, I'm kind of extremely, concerned and upset. I was on the subcommittee, the Beef and Bluff subcommittee at the Park District Forum back in like 2010 when NSSD came with a proposal to dig this big hole, and we put together the master plan, put a lot of planning things in place and, had some negotiations with the district at that time. That never went forward, it just kind of died. At that time, NSSD had, I think, $40 or $45 million of cash on their balance sheet. Now they don't have that anymore, and they've come back to the village all of a sudden, seems to me out of the blue, to say, oh, we need to do this again. Before it was, we need the generator, and the generator will keep this from happening. Well, they got the generator. The generator sat in their lot for like 18 months before they even deployed it down to the beach. And it still doesn't seem to be working because there's still electrical failures with this system, even though they have a backup generator. Some sort of circuit breaker gets blown and the juice goes out even when the generator is supposed to be operating. So it's like, the operational level of the district seems to be lacking, and now they're coming to us and saying, we want to dig this big hole, and nobody said, well, what if you looked at any alternatives? What other things might be available here to address this, like bigger pumps or bigger pipes that go up the hill to push more of this stuff back up the hill? I mean, these pipes have to be like antique by now, right? I mean, I've been here for 20 years and there have been no repairs or construction on that piping system. And so if it's from the early 70s, pretty soon it's going to have to be repaired and or replaced. So why don't we just get ahead of that and build a bigger piping system now that can handle any overflows? I mean, I'm really disappointed in the lack of due diligence that's been done and questions that have been asked. I mean, the Park District Board knew about this situation before this board did. For some reason, this thing went to the zoning committee and the ABR before it went to the full board. I don't understand that. I mean, maybe the zoning committee has oversight, but this is village property, right? This is owned by the property. It seems to me that the committees don't have any applicability here. This board is in charge of the village property. This board should be responsible to see if this is really what's needed here. Is this the best use that we can think of? Building a huge tank right next to the lake that might go under the lake level, that could be subject to getting washed away. I mean, has there even been an environmental impact statement done down there? Can you build a tank like that right next to the beach? I mean, it's unbelievable to my mind, the lack of sort of, questioning of this project and this proposal that has happened in this body, right? By the village, by the people who work for the village, by the people who represent the village. I'm extremely disappointed. I've been trying to push this for months, and I'm getting nowhere other than there is a contract now, I guess, the ordinance. A lot of what I see that's in that ordinance looks like things that I gave to Drew a few months ago to try to get into some sort of agreement with teeth in it. But we need more, and we needed more from the outset from this group. And that's all I have to say.
I can address some of those comments if you'd like.
I would appreciate that.
Okay. So Mr. Herman and I did have multiple conversations about this project over the last few months, and we've talked about going really high level. The need for this project has, yes, there have been catastrophic power failures down at the lakefront where there's actually two different electrical circuits that lead to the pumping facilities down there. There have been occasions where both circuits have failed, and that should have triggered the backup generator system to kick on and power the pumps. And there has been time to time been electrical failures where prevented that from happening, and there have been overflows into Lake Michigan of sewage. And so the idea is to create even more redundancy, that should that happen again, that there would be a reservoir to hold up to 2 days of sewage that could be produced at the village based off general production rates of the village. But that this would give them time to address that and make corrections and make sure that there's power to, once again, return on the pumps and pump the sewage material out of the community into the treatment facility. So not only would it need to do that, but this also provides, to Mr. Herman's point, that the system from time to time needs maintenance and needs repairs, that this actually provides the ability for the district to do that by giving a place to dump the sewage for a time frame to work on the system, because it's a pressurized system, or at least for half of it. So, so that gives the district that ability that it doesn't currently have today. And I don't know if we have Trustee Swarth out here. I don't know if I've misrepresented anything or if there's more thoughts on it than that.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Drew. So much I'd like to respond to. I mean, I've been in hundreds of hearings, both on your side of the aisle as well as in the audience and as a developer. And I learned that when things are going your way, sit down, don't say anything. But I do want to respond to some of these erroneous comments that this gentleman said. Ridiculous comments. The North Shore Water Reclamation District is one of the highest regarded institutions in the industry in the country, not just the state, in the country. So some of the comments that were made were just plain false, naive, and I'll just let it go there because I know people may be watching, or people even in the audience don't understand what we do. We are there to protect Lake Michigan and our facility for the general public, and we are one of the, obviously with very little debt, we take a lot of pride in there. We have some terrific professionals that have been maintaining our system, and what Drew is pointing out is we just want redundancy, so in a catastrophic failure, we'll be able to protect the lake. I've been very involved in Lake Forest Hospital. We did have we have two main feeds coming into the hospital, and when we had a failure, we actually closed the hospital down for the first time ever. And that can never happen again, and it can never happen at our lake with our facility. So that's why we're spending $10 million underneath the sand basin. No one would know it was there. We have the same kind of redundancy at Lake Forest. We don't hold sewage in that facility. We pump it out and clean it as soon as we can, and we'll do the same here and protect that lakefront for the residents. So we look forward to your vote. We look forward to moving this project forward. It's already on the street. It's already being bid out as we speak. We're looking forward to getting the project underway so we can shut down that lakefront just for one season and move on. So I could go on, but I'll let it go.
Just two other things I want to let Mr. Herman know. Procedurally, and whoever person's listening or curious, so procedurally, this project followed the process laid out in the village's codes and regulations that call it for to go through the recreational, institutional, and open space zoning districts RIO plan approval process. It actually started with the village board. The NSWRD came to 2 meetings, made check-ins at high level. Here's where we're at, here's where we're going. Then they said, yes, go ahead and go through the process. They went through that process, which was following 2 tracks. The zoning board looks at it, zoning board / planning commission look at it, and also the architectural board review looked at it for aesthetics. And those recommendations are recommended here, included here in the draft ordinance that the board has approved at first reading, and this is second and final reading for it tonight. To your comment about the aesthetics, there were a lot of comments provided very early. There was a joint workshop with the ABR and the PCCB on this project early on because we knew there'd be aesthetic concerns. And so the NSWRD and the Park District has participated in those meetings as well as the planning meetings leading up to development of these original concept plans and the final approved plans. They've been through this. They did talk about that original Park District beach plan that was also considered and when they looked at these concepts that were presented. So that didn't totally go to the wayside. That was considered. I would also say that at the Architectural Board review, there were a number of comments. My understanding, Mr. Herman, with regards to that specific concern of that elevating that those panels above that concrete wall on the north elevation on the back part of it, that my understanding is that the drawings show what the ABR wanted. And my understanding was that to add more to that would call more attention to it than necessary. I don't know specifically, Mr. Swarthout, if those conduits on that west elevation are going to be eliminated. There's a number of them on that side of the building leading all to those.
We will eliminate any conduit or redundancy or abandoned conduits or cabling. I think they were really addressing those on the south or east elevation more than
The west,
that,
but
than
there
the
are
west.
a number of them
There are
on that wall.
I'm sure there's a number of them that are required, but, you know, we take, and I think this board knows, we take the aesthetics, I take the aesthetics very seriously, and we will do whatever we can to eliminate any kind of a conduit or pipe that's not necessary, that's for sure.
And I guess the final piece, Mr. Herman was referring to a memorandum of understanding. This ordinance that's in front of the board has a new condition that's added. We were hoping to have the MOU complete at this point in time. We don't yet. But it's a condition of this approval that they will enter into that agreement with the village and the park district that outlines the responsibilities, kind of carrying on the consent decree, who's responsible for what and where, and we understand that's an enforceable document.
Yes, there's nothing certainly preventing a memorandum of understanding, something with that title from being enforceable or unenforceable at all. As you mentioned, depends on the individual provisions, and they can certainly be drafted enforceably.
And Mr. Herman, I'm not trying to do a tit for tat. I'm just trying to just want to understand for I guess clarify what's happened to date in terms of procedurally and outlining what's been incorporated into the ordinance itself so far and what's remaining. So hopefully, and happy to answer any questions if I missed something or didn't address a point that you raised.
Drew, could I just make a,
I just wanted to, for clarification of the listening audience and for the minutes, to just have you state your name and your position
I'm
with
sorry,
the
my name
NS.
is Tom Swarthat. I'm a trustee for the 4th Ward of North Shore Water Reclamation District.
Thank you.
So I know Trustee Briand
And
and
Trustee
Trustee
Briand.
Ryder have a question, comment.
so I'm drilling down not on the procedural aspect or some of the other things, but on the aesthetics. So the images that we were given by Mr. Herman are of the west elevation, because the people at home can't see it. But if you look at page 150 of the packet, it shows the west elevation, and it's actually looking southeast, so you see the western elevation. And my question for you, Mr. Swarthout, is one of Mr. Herman's requests was to have that louvered fence be, it appears to be taller. And it looks like there's the louvered fence and then arborvitae planted in front of it. But that fence is probably about, 8 to 10 feet high? Sorry, just, that's my guess if this rendering is accurate. And I think perhaps I'm putting words in Mr. Herman's mouth, but maybe what he's looking for is something that reaches the building height. And Drew, I'm wondering, is that just prohibited? And so it's impossible for us to camouflage that, except perhaps by, with plant material? And I don't mean Boston ivy, because respectfully, I would never put that on a brick building. It will destroy the mortar. So I would tell you, my second point is, ixnay that from your plan. It's the worst thing you could do for the building. Sorry. It's a terrible idea, and that's me, landscaping person. But I'm just curious about that fence, because maybe there's a reason why it's not as tall. Perhaps it's,
Yeah, I didn't think there was a structural reason it couldn't.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of one, or there's not a code issue, to my knowledge, that could limit the height of that.
the shrubs may get taller and may make
May
it a
surpass it
moot
in
point.
height as well, correct.
Right. If
Yeah.
they're 15 feet, then it becomes somewhat
Yeah.
irrelevant.
But
But that, I
Mike,
was just curious.
Mike Croak, you were at that meeting with the ABR and their conversations. I don't think my understanding again was that the height that was presented was acceptable to them, that they didn't view raising that would be beneficial to the aesthetics. Is that correct, Mike Croak?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. But there's nothing, Mike, that would, no ordinance or anything that would prevent it. They just made an aesthetic judgment.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Can't we just,
And I just want to point out that needs to be a louver fence that needs to be movable, because I think we need to get to those transformers and the equipment at some
Right,
point.
of
So-
course. Yeah, I
so-
wouldn't want
And
to,
to add 2 feet is
Yeah.
obviously
makes
not
it harder.
significant. Yeah, it's
And
not
makes that
significant.
harder. So
Right.
I guess what I'm trying to do is sort of tease out from you the understanding, so people understand why these decisions were made. Because oftentimes I think that we may talk about it and you have a high level of knowledge about this project, and sometimes the things that we take for granted that are understood are not. And so if we can explain it to the public and our residents, then there's that's a great explanation. That fence needs to be able to come out in the event that X, Y, Z happens, so it can't be taller than, because it, and looking down the road many years, not just in the short term, correct?
Right.
Okay. That helps, because I think it gives people a deeper understanding of why the project looks the way that it does.
Yeah, I would hope the general public understands that, our role is to really put a tank underneath 2 feet.
I think they
300
take you for granted
Yeah,
that you're
and
truly-
then I was frankly embarrassed about the aesthetics of the buildings as they exist now, and because of my background and my lifelong residency in Lake Forest, I think we need to do something about this. So my other trustees don't really share that same thought process,
That's okay.
and therefore I think that we've created, something that deserves the standards that the village has, and
Well,
that I expect and I know this board has. And so we've really taken a lot of care to try to make those improvements. So maybe I show a little frustration when people are throwing tomatoes at something that, and by the way, I built a house 30 years ago, very modest home in some regards in
And
Lake
you have
Forest.
Boston ivy all over it?
All over it. All over it.
I just pulled it off my new house and it took all the.
No, I know,
with
it's
it.
a Chicago Common, it is, I think, a real charming home, but the Boston ivy in the summer is just spectacular, and,
Okay.
but, I'm sorry.
Well, I have both trustee Ryder and Mr. Herman who would like to speak. Would you want to ask your question first before Mr. Swarthout sits down?
A comment and then a question. One is, I think what Mr. Herman started with was this aesthetic question, and I think his concern is that perhaps what the will of the ABR had been expressed hadn't been transferred into the language of the ordinance. I have not been able to decipher yet, but it sounds like Mike Krog, Glenn, who presumably was there, and others, and they have had the opportunity to review what did get reduced to writing and passed to us. They, and as I understand it, the chairman of that ABR has been
He was at the
here
first reading of the ordinance.
at first reading of the ordinance and is aware of what it was, and no one has corrected us that we left out the height of the louvers from what they had intended we receive. I think given all of that we need to move forward on the understanding that we have faithfully incorporated what the ABR intended us to incorporate. And once again, as I did on the Finance Committee, I hope to rely on the experts as much as possible. And so I would suggest that we do that here. I'm also hearing frustration with the process that doesn't have to do with the height of the louvers. And kind of disbelief, I guess, that we need this project at all. But one question I had to go to is the quality and the longevity of the pipes to which Mr. Herman referred. I presume if we could have done something other than put a 1 million gallon tank under the sand, we might have done so. But can you tell me about his concerns that there are pipes there that are going to be needing to be replaced in the near term?
Well, I'm not aware of those pipes needing to be replaced or winded anytime soon, that perhaps they need to be. I'm not aware of that. There's been no discussion at our board level whether those pipes need to be replaced, removed, enhanced. We do on a annual basis have many projects where we do replace major force main projects throughout the county in our district, 48-inch mains. We're doing one in Waukegan, which is a significant project, multi-million-dollar project, and that happens on occasion. But I'm not aware of any pipes failing in like Bluff. I think the failure had to do with the electrical system. And we are doing major improvements in all our electrical systems within the districts, and we're spending, I think that in the area of almost $30 million to do that over a period of time. So specifically for Lake Bluff's pipes, have no specific knowledge of that, but we do annually look at all our infrastructure and do a replacement, just like every municipality or every village.
Thank you.
So are there a schedule on which those are replaced? You mentioned one that was happening in Waukegan. What, do we wait for it to spring a leak and then we replace it?
Generally, we have a technique where they actually go sometimes within the pipe. There was a project in, off of Lake Hook Road. We actually had a gentleman go a couple thousand feet inside a 48-inch pipe. That's by the Botanical Gardens. There was a leak, and actually we detected it through they do it not just through a camera, but there's another technique they do, and then they detect a failure. There were some pipes that were installed in the 70s that had a failure rate, the way they pre-stressed the concrete. But there's nothing that my knowledge, and I can say here honestly, I have no knowledge that there's any failure that this gentleman's talking about.
And perhaps the point was, if we were to make, I think the point was, if we were to make larger pipes, then we wouldn't have needed a 1 million-gallon tank. I apologize, I'm misstating what your point was, but as I understand it, even if we had a gigantic pipe, we would need to take this system
Yes.
offline.
If those pipes were installed last year, it has no relevancy to this facility.
That was my understanding as well, that outages would still occur. The generator is still, we hope, useful, but outages need to be planned, and emergency outages need to be expected, in which case we'll need to have this functioning tank that will hold, as I understand it, 2 days' worth of waste. The other thing that he points out is about leakage, I'm not using the right word. I'm not going to be able to find the right paper. Provision for spillage or leakage even after this occurs, perhaps overflow, maybe that was the word he used, overflow from the tank itself. I take it that that is not something we expect, but if that were to happen, how would we be notified?
Oh, I think there's great communication between our district and the village. I don't think there's anything that goes on down on the lakefront that, of any consequence that the village isn't aware of. Sometimes they know before we do.
So the Memorandum of Understanding is, would be able to, we could in that identify our expectations for notice. If we, sounds like Mr. Swarta thinks that we can codify what's actually being done. And we would be, happy with that. But it sounds like that's an appropriate place to say within X hours of any notice of leakage, why people will be notified.
And I think the draft MOU has 48 hours.
Okay. Okay, well, I, for one, have heard you take a lot of feedback on this for months. It looks, so much better than it did several months ago. You are, I think, in my estimation, doing what the consent decree requires, that is to preserve to the best possible the enjoyment of that beach as a recreational facility. Is it perfect? I think reasonable minds might be able to disagree, but you guys have done a very good job of incorporating a lot of feedback.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Mr. Herman, do you need one more opportunity to ask more questions? Thank you, Mr. Swartout. If you'd like to have a seat.
I should have taken my own advice, shouldn't I?
We're grateful that you're answering these questions. We're grateful.
So I attended the ABR meeting and with respect to the height of the fence. And so the members who were here sort of went down the line, and Scott Stradiff was the first person, and he's the only one I know by name, but 'cause our kids went to school together, but he said he was in favor of, I also suggested that, and I don't know if it's in those pictures, but the design that,
The mural?
what's the landscape guys from the
Cliff Miller.
Cliff Miller with the timbers be continued instead of the louvers in front of those transformers or whatever those things are in there. And as well as put some, like a false front roof around the whole roof edge so it was softened. And Scott's said, I don't agree with the roof because it's going to make it look bigger, and we don't want this thing to look bigger. But I do agree with the timbers, and I agree with extending the height of the fence. And then it went down the line, and you can all go look at, I presume that's on video, and see what happened in that discussion. And it went down the line, and everybody agreed. Well, the next person said, I don't agree with the timbers. And then everybody after that agreed with that proposal. And then Neil Dahlman said, I think it's silly to raise the height of the fence because you're still going to be able to see it from some point on the road. And then it never got discussed again past that. So then about half an hour later, they went to the end of the meeting and tried to come up with a bullet point list that wound up in this packet of things that were to be implemented upon their recommendation. And this didn't make it in there. I just thought that was an oversight, or I don't know how that committee works. I mean, exactly in terms of how their views are expressed. But the way I had heard the conversation with respect to that issue unfold, I only heard one person who was not in favor of extending the height of the fence. And so I'm not sure why it didn't make it into that final list, but I think it should have, and maybe you should go back and look at it. And quite frankly, I'm sort of mystified at the resistance to putting a couple more feet of height on this fence, because as I understand it, it was expressed at that time, this fence is supposed to be movable, so you're going to be dropping in these slats of louvers, and I don't know if you can then just go in and pull those slats out. I don't know what the objection would be, or, you know, it's marginal cost at best to add a couple more slats to that, so every time I walk down the hill, I don't have to look at all this stuff all over the place, because frankly, it's kind of disturbing. And, you know, the other point that was made at that meeting was, well, you know, people had suggested painting this thing and getting it a different color than what Drew has expressed as jaundice yellow, I think. But, and the district said, well, we don't want to paint the brick building because we'll have to maintain it. And I kind of thought that that was apropos. But anyway, I still think that if you do your homework and you go back and look at the fence, I don't think it's anything with respect to you can't do it here, or it's going to get in the way of the operations. Adding a couple more louvers on top of this should not be a problem, and I really don't know why there are any objections. I just don't see it, so.
Yes, Joy?
I just
Markey?
want to say, I feel like there was actually a compromise that sort of surfaced while we were talking about this, which is the height of the shrubs. I would honestly myself, and I don't think we've actually stipulated exactly what all the shrubbery and all the greenery is gonna look like, the landscaping. But rather than put in a huge wall of fencing, I would rather see the shrubbery right there just grow higher and block it in a natural way. And I think that might be a nice compromise, because honestly, I guess if I was walking down the street there, coming down on the north side of the elevation, I'd rather see greenery than see a big, huge 15-foot fence. So it's just me, but I feel like that could be a nice compromise that we could work towards, and I think it would blend better with the feel of the beach in general. So, that's my comment.
Any further comments from the board?
I was just going to say the other compromise, I know we talked about this before about painting, but it's something that I've advocated for the whole time, is to paint it black. And I agree with Mr. Herman, that is true. Now, I understand there's a maintenance aspect to it, I do. And I know that, that we've been having this conversation for a long time, so I understand that. But that building is of a particular age. I've been looking at it for 51 years, so I get it. But that would obviate the need for the fence to be taller. And I do think that if we're having a conversation about aesthetics and about what Lake Bluff deserves, then I think that it wouldn't be too much to say that maintenance, which probably wouldn't be as burdensome as one might argue it would be, is something we'd also deserve. So I think that I realize I won't be a party to these conversations after tonight, because this is my last board meeting. But I do think that, to quote the Rolling Stones, painting it black just isn't that bad of an idea. If Peter Friedman were here, he would understand why I just made that reference. But in all honesty, I really do. Yellow brick is of a particular architectural period in American construction. It's a very blessedly short period, and I do think that's something that should be considered. To Trustee Marquis' point, though, the arborvitae are probably emerald green arborvitae, and they'll be about 15 feet tall if they thrive. So that gets you close to where you want it to be, but the black would take it to the next level. And I have to say, I totally agree with Mr. Herman from an aesthetic point of view. I think we should ask for it and see where you get it. Never hurts to ask.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of aesthetics, as many people are in this room as equal the number of opinions regarding what would be of the highest priority, of the best options, and certainly we've had lots and lots of meetings where we've all had an opportunity to throw in our thoughts, and it's a product of a committee, and so when you have a product of committee, it's not going to look like one person's complete vision. It's going to entail a number of compromises, and it's my understanding that the product that we have now has evolved and changed, and by and large, the board has been pleased with the responsiveness and the changes that have been made, and we're grateful for that. We're grateful for the investment and the opportunity to have redundancy built in so that we don't have another 20 events over the next 10 years where we have some failure and some sewage. At this point in time, I think we've kind of exhausted the thoughts, and I'm looking for a motion.
One more comment about painting it, because I think that maintenance issue is sort of spurless. But if the ABR had been saying to us, that is a hill we're going to die on, it must be painted X color, then I'd be concerned it's not being painted. But I'm afraid that you think black is good, and I might think green is good, and somebody else might say brown, and I really would listen to the experts. Had they been saying, no, you guys, this is what we must insist on, I'd be right there. But we've gotten this far through our process, and I'm willing to move forward. I guess I would ask on the size of the fence if we could do something that's perhaps flexible. I don't know if it really is a matter of putting more bracing up so you could stick more louvers in if you wanted, if there were some way to manufacture that. I tend to think that we could never have a tall enough fence to cover everything, and really, that if we were going to put a fence up to the roof line, it would look massive. It would look so massive, we would regret it. But having gotten here through a lot of community input, I am ready to approve it, and the issues that Bill has pointed out about enforceability, about concerns about timeliness of notice, I'm glad to relegate that to the terms of the MOU itself rather than the ordinance.
Thank you, Trustee Ryder. I think you've summarized beautifully. At this point in time, I think we're ready to take a roll call vote.
Trustee Brand,
Aye.
trustee Inkerman,
Aye.
trustee Markey,
Aye.
trustee Rappin,
Aye.
trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. We are now back to item 8C, which is part of the village administrator's report. We moved that forward. It's an informational report from the Lake Bluff Open Lands Association. Thank you so much, Mr. Swartout. Okay, Drew, do you want to preface this?
I will, if you, maybe you want to read the cover note really quick while I
Okay.
get the presentation
I
ready?
can
That
do
would be helpful.
Thank you, thank you. So in an effort to save a small wetland and white pine plantation from being developed into a housing subdivision, the Lake Bluff Open Lands, or LBOLA, was formed in 1981 by Carolyn Getz. Carolyn's success led to the eventual purchase of the property by the Lake Bluff Park District, which is now known as Carolyn Getz Wetland Preserve. From there, LBOLA has worked hard to fulfill its mission to protect, preserve, restore, and manage open spaces and natural areas in Lake Bluff through the use of established land management practices, sound conservation techniques, and educational activities for local residents. On Monday night, tonight, LBOLA Board Member President Ben Miller and staff Michelle Morachek will give a presentation regarding their organization, highlight past successes, and discuss new projects. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Again, Ben Miller, President, Lake Bluff Open Lands, also resident of Lake Bluff.
Michelle Rajek, good job on the name. Working for Lake Bluff Open Lands, also a resident here in Lake Bluff.
You also have Al with you?
Al's here too, he's our treasurer.
Al Treffs, Treasurer of Lake Bluff Open Lands, as well as in the audience, and Bill Herman, also a member of Lake Bluff Open Lands.
Great.
Yeah, so we're here tonight because, one, we just want to first make our presence known. I don't know if we've mixed up the slides a little bit, so I'm a little disoriented. Forgive me.
As am I. That's not the next slide.
We wanted to,
There it is.
we wanted to edit a bit.
Hold on. Stand by. I don't know why that did that.
Do you want this one up? Which one do you want up? The picture of the,
Hold on.
right
Got it.
there, right at the beginning.
I got it.
Our mission.
Yeah, not expecting you to read it, but it at least gives us a good starting point. I'll make it
Okay.
quick, though. We can skip through this. You can go right to the third slide. That is one of the biggest things we compete with here. It's a mistaking for Lake Forest Open Lands. We're definitely the smaller redheaded stepchild, as it were, more grassroots organization, but we operate in Lake Bluff, solely in Lake Bluff, and we don't extend anywhere else. So I think that's an important distinction to make here. As was summarized in our introduction, we were formed in 1981 when Carolyn Getz aimed to preserve a wetland over off of what's currently Bath and Tennis Court on Wimbledon. And then back in the 90s, we secured a property that has now become the Skokie Reserve, hopefully in the near future, the Skokie Preserve. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Over time, we've acquired or taken over conservation of 14 properties throughout the village and numerous conservation easements. Those are all lined up on this map here.
Can I just point something out? You also have done amazing work along far, when you don't even have it marked, right? Not even, along 6, you've gone farther west.
Yes,
And there's a
so-
sign up there right now, and every time I look at it, I think, you guys are doing such amazing work. Thank you, because you cleared out all of that buckthorn, and it's now, not all of it, lots of it.
Well, to be fair, we didn't.
Oh, we did have some of it contracted, that's right.
Village contracted, so thank you.
But in
because
partnership with
that was
LBOLA,
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I know you
These are
did some
all
of it. I
spoilers
volunteered
for
one
Ben's
day.
presentation.
But it is amazing, the growth that you see on the easternmost end of that section, right by that house, right behind the park board building. It's just, I'm excited every time I drive through there. So you're not claiming credit for that along there, but you guys have done a huge
This
amount of work
brochure
there.
predates the grant that allowed us to do that.
No, but it's awesome, really.
So during COVID, we worked with the village to ghostwrite a grant application for the Green Regions, which is a ComEd-funded grant. And they provided $10,000 to replant that corridor in exchange for spending, I believe, $16K is what the village committed to clearing out the buckthorn so that we can move forward in establishing prairie, savanna-type
It's awesome.
habitat out there. We're in your kind of
Thank you.
1.5-ish right now, and over the past 3 weeks, we've been planting it. We're gonna continue planting it tomorrow if anyone's available. But yeah, so that's to
Thank
your
you.
point. So this does not include that area, and technically, it's not
yours.
ours right now, but we are working with the village to figure out exactly, talking about memoranda of understanding, how to move forward with that and who's responsible for what. So that's our
Looks great.
preserves. Please visit them all. They are all unique and wonderful assets to the community. So moving forward to today, we have a very robust volunteer base that includes village residents, high school students, the Boy Scouts, Rotary Club, Lions Club, Indian Guides and Princesses. I'm butchering that name, so forgive me. But all in the past year have committed significant hours to both Park District, Village, and Lobola properties throughout the city. And we are supported pretty much exclusively up until this year by donations. We do have some revenue that we generate on our own, and up till this year, we did have a very modest revenue source from grants. But that kind of changed as of a couple weeks ago. Next slide, please. Oh, and then here's to
there
your
it is.
points. So this was the Green Region grant that we are working on right now to follow the thematic landscape plan approved by the board back in, I believe, 19, if I remember my dates correctly.
And what Ben talked about earlier is that, so on the Skokie Preserve to the south, on the other side of the street, the village has an agreement with Lobola to manage those lands on behalf of the village. We don't have that for the corner here or for the north side of 176. We're working through this, and he mentioned earlier, we're talking about creating something to memorialize that relationship long-term, but that's in the works. And part of that, we've also talked about going a little further west in front of PW there, like where the Skokie ditch is. That'd be a really pretty area if that was opened up as well. Different project, maybe different funding mechanism, but to get in there and do the beautification by chainsaw, continuing that, and getting rid of the buckthorn through there as well.
That is another point, that most of our work up until now has been very grassroots, guys with chainsaws, manually hauling material out. So when we talk about the numerous hours we've invested in these properties, please understand it is the most grueling way to do things because we do not have substantial capital funding to go in there and bring in contractors to do large-scale work. Asterisk. So we then bring to the Skokie River Prairie Land and Water Reserve, which is what's currently labeled as the Skokie River Preserve on the south side of 176, right next to Mariani. You wanna take over?
I guess this is where I'm gonna take over.
I'm gonna let Michelle take over.
So why prairie? You can, the highlights are there in the green. There's not much left. This site was recognized in the early 80s as having prairie plants, which then was allowed the IDNR, or the Nature Preserve Commission, to designate it as a land and water reserve in 94 or 5. No, I'm sorry. The village agreement came around in 94, 95. There's a lot of 94, 95s in my life right now, and I don't know why it was such a big year around here, but it was. 2010 was when the Illinois Nature Preserve Commission made it a land and water reserve, which is somewhat important to understand because it is the second highest designation the state has for protections. We are hoping to make that go one step further and get it into a nature preserve status, which is the highest level.
One of the contingencies of which is all of the relevant properties. The whole preserve is actually subdivided into lots. They all need to be in
Right there.
public hands.
So thank you. Those two blue lots in the middle, and Drew's gonna be able to speak to this better, because I thought we were down to
Just down to
one.
one, and we're in contact with them.
But I can't find the record of when that's.
Just went through the other one.
There you go. So I don't know which of those two blue lots is yet to be acquired, but there, you guys, the villages and communications. So once those two lots, or the last final lot is in public ownership, the green ones there are the ones that actually Lobola owns. But as long as the whole parcel is in public ownership, that will be one less hurdle to get into preserve status. So that's very exciting. And thank you for acquiring these parcels. Was that the next slide right there?
It was not.
Okay, because boy, I'm really off my game if it was. There's one more, can you go back one more? Okay, so the other thing about our prairie is it does connect to Oriole Grove, which is now county, and then further that, Lake Forest Open Lands, Skokie Preserve, which has been restored and probably longer than we are. I can't speak to that either, but I feel like Lake Forest Open Lands been working on that longer than we have. They do have a preserve as part of their site down there, nature preserve. Anyway, that connectivity to larger ecosystem is critical to our environment, our habitat. It's our responsibility, each one of us along the route there, to take care of and manage, maintain, and improve each of our parcels. And Middle Fork actually comes into this, the county's making a big push to eradicate the buckthorn in the county, but they started over there around Middle Fork. They have if you guys don't know this, there is a 25-acre parcel over there within Middle Fork that is a remnant black soil oak savanna of such quality, there's only 2 in the world. So they are very protective, and our buckthorn is certainly going there. That's the bad news. It travels through the air. So that's important, but it also, restoring our prairie here at Skokie also supports the thematic plan of getting the buckthorn out of our community. Okay. We received a grant from the Nature Preserve Commission for $59,000 in which to do work in the Skokie to get our prairies back to prairie status. There's a lot of invasives coming in that, to Ben's point, our chainsaw guys that are amazing, there's just a limit to how much time or how much work we can get done with the volunteer base. So we got a grant to help contract that out. It's a 2-year timeline. It started in September, although I was planning on January, so we're ahead of the game, right? Volunteers will still be expected to do a whole lot of work. We're going to be able to increase our interns next year by double. We'll get 2 extra ones, and this grant pays for that. We're also going to get some help with some of the prescribed burning. And then we have this 4-acre section of buckthorn that is truly beyond probably our capabilities, us being the volunteers. So that red section there on the east side, that is all buckthorn. It's about 4 acres. The yellow is where we are working for this grant. The reason that middle section was excluded is because the grant cannot be, let me rephrase that. We could have worked on private properties, but we would have needed their permission. So I figured just eliminate that section that will not be part of the grant, because that was just gonna be one level of complication we didn't need. So that's why there's a big missing section in there, because those private lots were still kind of in the way. Okay, next slide. That is a picture of we call it the wall. And you can, again, just see where it is relative to the rest of the preserve.
It's a really stark contrast when you're looking at it. That is not the most descriptive of shots, but it is tall grass, prairie-like landscape until you hit a thicket of buckthorn. Much like the thicket of buckthorn as you're driving down 176, 5 years ago, you could not see anything past it. It was nothing but green thorns hiding a whole bunch of gems in there. There are mature oaks hiding in that thicket that you cannot see, and it is a travesty.
So ideally, with this grant, the ideal timeline would be to get, this winter, that wall removed. We have already communicated with Tallgrass Restoration, to do that. I mean, they know this is something we like to get done, within those 2 years. So that the volunteers will be working on all those yellow sections, all winter long again. Volunteer opportunities never end. We'll be doing a lot of brush pile burnings, because as we take out our invasives, ideally this winter would be a good time to do the wall. It gives us 2 years within that grant to help, to get that additional help with the interns with Tallgrass, who's gonna do the burns for us as well. If they can burn that twice, that'd be amazing. In the meantime, it also gives us ample time to start fundraising for opportunities to replace some of that. There's a grant coming up I'm gonna sure try hard for. Several, all of the above, fundraising events. With any luck, all this is ready to replant by 2024. That includes seed, that includes plants, trees, oaks especially.
And there is a strong intent to replant just with natives,
Absolutely, in the prairie.
well, on the east end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's still the Skokie. So,
you have a question?
I do have a question.
Please.
So, so when you guys are working on removing well, first of all, thank you for all the work you're doing. It's really helping us beautify Lake Bluff.
Happy to do it.
When you guys are taking down the 4-acre, the thicket of buckthorn, the wall, are homeowners there that are on McLaren that back up, are they aware of what you're doing?
they will be.
They will be.
We understand there's communication to be had before we get there. We wanted this in front of you guys first.
Okay.
Bottom line is, we're gonna need your support. But we absolutely wanna communicate with them. I wasn't here in the 94, 95, so I can't.
Neither was I.
You know, so some of you can remember that, we can't, we've just heard stories. I do know that there's 7 properties on that
Okay.
line, and 5 are new since 95. I don't know about the other 2. It's new since 21, actually, that's as far back as I can get in the records.
Okay.
I think it's a new crowd. I think it definitely needs to be a communication and education, cooperation.
Great.
And as I understand it, aside from what we're doing, there is an interest in removal of buckthorn from the private property side.
Okay, great.
And I would defer to Drew and Jake, who I've also discussed this with, to answer that question
So-
specifically.
And I don't know, Kate, there was another slide that shows
Actually,
that one. So see the yellow, those are their, that's private lots.
okay,
And they, when in 94, 95, they were given or purchased very cheaply, an unbuildable lot behind their house.
Okay.
Lots. So those are, the highlighted ones are their buffer lots.
okay.
Some have cleared, some have not. It's kind of a mixed
Mixed bag.
back there. But I think there's gonna be, gonna be a lot of different, there's gonna be 7 different opinions down that road. But I'm gonna be optimistic and say a lot of people understand and support this. But again, we're coming here to
Yeah.
get this in front of you guys first.
Yeah, I think historically, the village has pushed to maintain a buffer of evergreen, or not even evergreen, just a buffer between the village's acreage and the neighborhood. And what's different about this project is not only is it the removal of the invasive species, but it's replanting with the canopy level and understory.
Yes.
Right? So this is replacing it with a buffer of quality. So historically, again, the village has pushed to maintain the buffer. We've been talking about what documents may need to be amended or necessarily, but certainly the village could send a letter. We've sent a letter to these folks most recently about folks that had drifted on the village's property and have received a handful of replies, but one of the replies on the northern side was, hey, I want to eradicate all this buckthorn. And they've already done that, and they've gone beyond. So there is a push for people and a realization that we need to get rid of this invasive species. So that is already happening privately on public land because people want to get rid of it. So if there's no heartburn, we can send a letter out to these folks and say, this is coming, here's it's going to be replaced with, here's a plan, here's the type of species that are going to go back in.
And we're gonna tie back to the thematic landscape plan.
Yep.
I mean, it's something the village has already seen and approved. We're happy to keep
With all
to
our
that
partners,
list.
yep.
Well, and I actually had one other question
Please.
about the prescribed burning. So, I guess when we talk about prescribed burning and we have homes, right, you know, I mean, clearly that's something we're thinking about, right? How the burning is done, and would it encroach up back that way, or is the prescribed burning? I've been back there before and I've seen when you guys have done a burning back there. But I just wasn't sure how that would play in now that you won't have the buffer there.
So
Like
we-
this big buffer.
We have to get burn permits every 6 months.
Yeah.
The fire department is quite strict or very careful on how we do prescribed burns. Tall Grass, being actually a professional company,
They would have to, they would
They
be
would still get
responsible for
permits?
securing their own
Um,
permits, and the village, I should say, the fire chief has certain stipulations on what weather conditions can be present when prescribed
it
by
has to
our,
blow the other way.
Okay,
basically, it has to blow west.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can't, we just don't burn when the fire has any risk of going towards
homes or
homes or buildings or streets
you.
even. I mean, that's 176 will someday be burned, but that's a tough one because of the road. So there's a lot of constraints or regulations. And we follow
Considerations.
that, of course, because they'll take our burn permits away. Yeah, but yeah, it can get close, but it's done safely. But that does, you're right, it's a
To give some
concern for
context to what a prescribed burn is it's a fiscally efficient way to control invasive species regrowth by laying down fire, which buckthorn, honeysuckle, species that aren't adept to handle fire, it kills them, but things like oak or tall grasses or native forbs or anything like that, they live in an environment that has that disturbance, so they are fine.
Oh,
And you burn in a season where it is not going to be immediately detrimental, early spring, late fall.
That's interesting, thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other highlights on your presentation that you'd like to
No, I
go
forgot what
through?
other slides I have.
Okay.
I'll make a couple.
I'm
real
not
quick-
sensing a lot of resistance from the board. That's wanted to say,
pair of quick
you're doing a
notes.
great job.
Couple quick notes.
Okay,
We
let's-
are working with Mariani Landscape. We are trying to bring them on board because there is also a kind of buckthorn corridor along Muskogee Ditch. We're clearing up to it. We're hoping to get some buy-in from them to clean up their side so we don't have, invasive spreading in when it's not something we can control.
Right.
And I had another point, but it escapes me, so I'll defer.
Ben, you'd mentioned that there might be some replanting of natives along the border where the buffer is for the homes.
Yeah.
Are you talking about deciduous shrubs that you'd put there, or, so that you have that border between the tall grass and what was buckthorn?
Yes.
And using natives like black haw viburnum, things like that? Do you have species in mind, and any evergreen species, like? So none of no white cedars, nothing, no?
We do have, and the thematic landscape species list is our basis. Truth be told, I looked through that a little bit and kind of made some crossed off a couple of things, but I also added a few. I have the list over there if you'd like to see my thoughts.
Yeah.
The thematic landscape had to consider the roadside tolerant plants.
Right.
Whereas we would have more options, not needing to worry about salt
Right.
and harsher conditions. So there are some other species I think we could put in there that are native and appropriate,
Yeah.
but again,
I'm just thinking of the piece about what Trustee Markey brought up, and the education piece of letting people know that there are alternatives, because I know that there are a lot of people that their properties back up to open lands in various communities who have made it clear that they don't want the buckthorn removed because it's a screen. And, but there are so many options that are not, that would provide screening that don't reproduce at this same rate. So, Drew, does the village have any intention of helping Labola with that education piece for the people that are directly affected by this project? Because I'm all in favor of this. I think this is fantastic, and I applaud your efforts. I think everything that you've done has improved not just the aesthetics, but the actual, your stewardship is just really, really important. But what about what the village could do for residents to help them? Because I know people aren't, not everybody works in landscaping. They don't know what to get and where to go.
Yeah, I think what the plan, tentative plan would be the village would send a letter in conjunction with Lobola's, some background material, but also list like a sample, this is what, here's a representative lot, here's what the plantings would look like
Right.
after post-completion of the project.
Right.
And show a visual aid and have, here's what this is, viburnum, this is, bur oak, or what, whatever the species are in the
Right.
layout, and how they would just, again, a representative sample, not an exact plan. And then we can say, if you have questions about this, you can refer to the thematic landscape plan the village built in conjunction with our partners like Lobola and the Garden Club and the Park District and the village. And so that's something we
Because
can
a
share.
lot of these plants are available not too far away at a place in Lake Bluff. So, if they wanted to, I'm thinking of what they might want to do on their own side, because they don't have control over the property that Lobola is in charge of, but they have control over their own. And so as to not undo all of your hard work. That's what I'm thinking, is that the private landowners obviously can do what they want, but if they maintain any buckthorn on their property, it defeats a lot of this hard work, because it reproduces at such a ridiculous rate. And unfortunately, Ben's right, it does fly, it has wings.
I don't know if there's a lot of that on the private property, though.
There's a couple lots that
But not a lot.
haven't been cleared.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much.
I know it doesn't, but you're right, and hope, if we, in fact, I was heard that one of those houses just got torn down last week. Is that
I don't think
true?
anything's been torn down recently. I think there's some new ownership on a property
Is going to be?
that's going to be improving the property. I don't think they're tearing it down.
Oh, okay. Well, that one, I think that lot's still very dense with buckthorn. Like I said, there might be only a couple who didn't really clear a lot. But you're right, I would love to be able to work with them and encourage them to get rid of it and help them figure out what to do next.
Yeah,
And there are resources out there.
Yeah.
In my professional, actually the city forester for Highland Park, and I'm a
Right.
big believer in the Chicago Region Trees Initiative Healthy Hedges Program. It's really great educational material for both my residents down there and for residents we encounter up here. And that is what I would push, because it's very simple to understand, it's very visual, and it's very easy to sell.
yeah. Just making sure people have that information, I think, is big from the perspective of the village and what our role is in all of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. And I'm hearing a lot of enthusiastic support from board members regarding the work that you do and the proposed work that you're going to be doing. So thank you again for your informational report.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Thank you.
All right. We'll go back to our original order of business. The village finance report is next. The August 2022 financial report has been distributed, and noteworthy items found on the monthly report include a number of things that, Bettina, if you wouldn't mind presenting to us, that would be great.
So the monthly sales tax revenue on a cash basis for August fiscal year '23 is $335,890, which is $73,597, or 18% less than the fiscal year '22 cash basis receipts. However, it's still 7.5% greater than the pre-COVID receipts from August fiscal year '20. Building permit revenue for fiscal year '23 to date is $295,300, or $127,850 greater than the same reporting period last fiscal year. General fund fiscal year '23 total revenues of $5,298,774 are $569,141 greater than the fiscal year '22 year-to-date revenues. This is in part due to accounting accrual entries related to vehicle licenses and business licenses that were booked later in fiscal year '22. Fiscal year '23 current expenditures are consistent with or less than budgeted for the total general fund. The fiscal year-to-date expenditures of $3,578,228 are $45,824 less than the expenditures for the same period in fiscal year '22.
Thank you, Bettina. I just realized I did the item 7B, the financial report, before I did the warrant report, so I apologize for that. Were there any questions for Bettina regarding the financial report?
I know I asked this question a lot about sales tax receipts, so now we're seeing, them starting to drop. Like, I think we thought that would happen at some point, right, given that they were so high in the past year. Have you been reading or have you heard, I know you're kind of in that industry, like, where you think tax revenues are going? Are we still kind of working off a crystal ball, like hoping we can figure it out?
Well, that's why I've been looking back and comparing to the pre-COVID numbers, and we're still in line or above those pre-COVID numbers. When you look at the charts, we're charting still above those numbers. Still hard to predict, especially with the current state of, the economy. I did look forward to next month, and September's revenues are still 10.7% greater than that prior fiscal year.
Do you think that's tied to inflationary rates, because inflation has gone up and that directly impacts a lot of sales tax? Or do you have any idea? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I think that the last year's sales tax numbers were just significantly higher related to purchasing patterns and the dynamics of what happened through COVID. And now we're just seeing things kind of return to normal, and the supply of automobiles is changing, and everything is just kind of catching up.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So wouldn't it make sense, though, that if the price of everything has gone up, year over year, we're at, what is CPI? I think it just went down a little bit, but it's 9%. Wouldn't we be making more money? So the sales have to have constricted.
Right.
So we should have more in our coffers, not less, which I have to attribute to the automotive. I look back to 2019, automotive was 68% of the pie chart.
Right.
Now, general merchandise didn't exist. That category had $0 in it. But I just have to look at that and think, wow, that's troubling. And I don't know if you've heard anything to the contrary, but I have not heard anything to indicate that that would be changing anytime soon.
So you're correct, in the sector that's affecting this is the automobile. And no, I haven't heard anything that's necessarily changing it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the way interest rates on loans are flying right now, it's just gonna, decline probably a little bit more.
Continue. You know what I did notice though, Bettina, I was curious. I noticed that building permit revenue was up significantly. What project is driving that? Is that out at the business park, or what's going on there?
No, we've had several new homes,
Okay.
demos and big numbers come in. It's more than one, there's two of them. Maybe if Mike Crook's still on the line, he can speak to those, but there's a couple big permit packages that have come in.
Okay.
Last
I just wasn't sure, because I know that we had voted on the storage facility. Drew, I didn't know if that was underway, that the liquid control site, but it was such a substantial amount that I was just curious.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We did issue phase 1 of the storage facility at 105 Albrecht, which is the remodeling of the interior of the building.
Okay.
So we did collect that revenue. We are soon, I think, about to issue phase 2, which is the addition on the east side of the building. So we are still yet to collect that revenue. And similarly, up with the Kriebel lots next to Shore Acres, where I know you've reviewed the subdivision last year.
Oh, right.
We issued the permit for 2 of their buildings, but the main building permit is yet to be issued. So I think we obviously got a good bit of revenue from both of those major projects, but we have not issued all the permits yet. So there's still more that we will probably still see in this current fiscal year, and in addition to a couple other new houses in town going on.
Yeah, that's right. And the Shore Acres is big. Yeah, so I thought the automotive numbers are concerning, just because if you look at them tracking through June and extrapolate out, you're going to fall short of that. 2021 was just anomalous, I think, in terms of sales, don't you, Bettina?
I do.
2.2. You're not going to see that again.
No.
Yeah. Unfortunately. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions regarding the financial report? We don't have a motion yet. Could I have a motion to accept the report?
So moved?
So moved by trustee Ryder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by trustee Markey. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And then backing up to 7A, which is the warrant report. This is the expenditure of village funds for payment of invoices in the amount of $471,275.32 for the period from September 13th through September 26th, 2022, and expenditure of village funds for payment of payroll in the amount of $369,466.49 for August of 2022. All told, the expenditures are $840,741.81. The reports and documents that are attached and presented to the board are the warrant report for the period from September 13th through the 26th. Again, $471,275.32. The invoice register shows checks with a status of open or paid, and all the checks with the status of open are computer-generated checks for the board's final approval, and the checks with the status of paid have been processed manually, and the payroll report as well. So do I have a motion
So moved.
to approve? Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you, trustee, for the, Markey for the first, and thank you, trustee Ryder, for the second. Any questions or comments regarding the warrant report?
If I may, there were two things that I had a couple of people ask me about on the board. One was there was a handful of individuals that were identified for small sums of payment. Those were some local high schoolers that were doing the work of the village, that were actually going out and sharing this concept for a different way to do composting. The village has been encouraging, finding ways for folks to participate in the village's ride-along program. Some folks have said doesn't work great for me, and some folks felt compelled enough to say, that doesn't work great for me, and I'd like to try something else that I think would work for me, and maybe others. And so they were looking, doing a pilot program in the North Terrace. And I walked around with some of those kids earlier this summer. I should say in the summer now, it's the fall, sadly. But generally speaking, very well received in the neighborhood. The person who's kind of been organizing this pilot, trying to get this to take off, actually gave the money to the village. We're kind of a conduit issuer. They provided the money to pay for these kids' work. That's what they want to do. And so that's what we did. So that's, if you're curious, that's what that was. So look for that to continue to come forward. Hopefully yet this year. I think we're kind of struggling at this moment with the pilot, trying to identify somebody to help construct kind of those communal receptacles for folks to deliver their compost or food scraps to for composting purposes. Builder had originally said they would do it, and it doesn't seem like that's going to work out right now. So we're trying to see if an Eagle Scout will take it on, and there's be some interest in that. So,
Thank you, that was one of my questions as well.
yeah. So the other item I did provide to the board in the packet of the information materials at the dais, a resolution that was approved dealing with ending some litigation that the village was involved with, an settlement agreement where the village helped pay for some stormwater infrastructure. Fortunately, in this matter, the village's insurer agreed to pay for the other half, and so that there was a payment to Midwood LLC that was in there for $12.5. So I had a couple questions about that. So that's
Wonderful.
all. Happy to answer any other questions if there are any.
Any other questions? Thank you. At this time, this is a voice, or a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Markey?
Aye.
Trustee Rabin?
Aye.
Trustee Ryder?
Aye.
Trustee Brian? Trustee Ingram?
Aye. All right. Back to the village administrator's report. You have a number of items, Drew, slated for discussion.
Thank you. Let me get back to that. So the first one deals with another litigation matter. The village has been talking with some attorneys who could represent the village in litigation involving Monsanto and PCBs and the village's obligations to have to do some cleanup and other education work around this work. There was a class action. The village is looking to opt out of that class action and join in with a number of other municipalities who are going to work with Seeger Weiss. Their agreement's attached for your review. If there's no heartburn, Peter Friedman and I can enter into that agreement on behalf of the village. Peter Friedman has also, the village attorney has talked about having local counsel to be the conduit between Seeger Weiss and representing the village on that matter. That firm, we're waiting for the engagement, but if there's comfort with Peter and I working with them to nail that down and get that done and take care of that as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we didn't have an engagement letter to share with you all, but was hoping for your direction to go ahead and execute that on behalf of you all as well.
Yes. Any comments or questions from the board? And would we like to recommend that they move forward?
Agreed.
I'm sensing that that is what the board is recommending. So do we need a motion to
Direct me to
recommend-
do so.
To direct you to do so?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're looking for, I guess I could do it, although, right, or no?
I'm going to ask for it.
Approve the Weiss engagement letter and then
Yes.
authorize the village.
So we're looking for a motion to engage Seeger and Weiss to investigate the viability of an action against the manufacturer of PCBs and other potential appropriate defendants, and if appropriate, to prosecute such an action. And
To authorize the village
to authorize the
administrator
village administrator to engage.
with Prendergast Layden for the same purpose.
Yes.
That.
The other entity for the same purpose.
SW and PL.
Sorry for the choppiness
No,
of the
that's
motion.
okay, that's okay. Do I have a motion?
Why'd you say so moved? So moved.
Thank you, trustee Ryder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Markey. And do we need all in favor?
Voice vote.
Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The recommendation carries. Next is 8B, which is a notice regarding the designation of authorized emergency vehicles.
Purely information, unless anybody wants to send up a red flag and say, don't do that.
Right.
It's been done. And if you all have the ability to say otherwise, it's never happened, but it's never been an issue. But that's the procedures that the village has adopted. So that's there for you informationally.
And so do we need a voice vote to accept? Nope.
You know,
We
just
we
need only to take,
There we go. It's duly noted.
okay.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Then the last one was the informational report regarding the village's review of planned residential developments.
Yeah, that's been proceeding at the PCZBA. It probably would have been here in front of you tonight as well. But the village's consultant, Tesca, couldn't make this due to a prior engagement, so you'll see that in 2 weeks, but it's moving right along.
Thank you so much.
That's all I have.
That's it from the village administrator. Okay, next we have village attorney's report. Do we have a village attorney's report?
Nope, nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Village president's report. I don't believe we have a village president's report as well. On to acceptance of the correspondence. Please note, correspondence was delivered to the village board of trustees and the informational reports dated September 9th and 16th, 2022. Do I have a motion to accept the correspondence?
So moved.
Thank you, trustee Briand. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Markey. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, agenda item 12, which is a resolution authorizing Illinois Transportation Enhancement Program, Itep, grant application for the pedestrian safety improvements on Green Bay Road. So a resolution has been prepared for us to authorize the submission of an Illinois Transportation Enhancement, or ITEP, grant application to the State of Illinois Department of Transportation, or IDOT. This grant application includes proposed improvements along a section of Green Bay Road between Illinois routes 176 and 137 that include a new pedestrian bridge over the railroad within unincorporated Lake County and multi-purpose trail within the village of Lake Bluff and the city of North Chicago. If this grant application is successful, the grant funding will pay for up to 80% of the cost of construction for eligible improvements. The village plans to use the recent state of Illinois appropriation of $1.2 million to cover the required 20% cost participation that the village will have. Do I have a motion regarding this item?
So moved?
Thank you, trustee Ryder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from trustee Briand. Do we have any questions from the board members, or do we have any,
No, the only thing-
summary of what's the work that is going to be done?
We've been working on this, and Jeff Hansen, the village engineer, we were talking about this. I had a question from a trustee about which bridge, which approach we were going to take, and I think the answer is the most cost efficient, which means a different bridge. Ideally, we would have a bridge that IDOT could worry about attached to their bridge, but it seems to be just financially not possible to pursue that route. But this has many positive aspects. I mean, it's completely segregated from automobile traffic, and it's, so that's the approach we're going to take to do that. North Chicago so far has been great working with in terms of preparing these materials. They're due Friday, so we're working with them. The county has provided a letter of support as well. This all feeds into a greater system. Ideally, this gets funded and we can make it happen. So if you've noticed that the village received $1.25 million state appropriation to do the bridge, it's not enough even to do the bridge. So we're going to have to keep, trying to find other ways to pay for this project. So this is hopefully a good way, and hopefully the grant's successful. So.
Any further questions from board members?
And just one little detail.
Yes.
A nit, if you will. This is not a multi-purpose path. The way it works, it's a 6-foot path, but according to IDOT terms, it'll be called a sidewalk. So, for the record.
Meaning it's not for cyclists?
It'll be for both, but it's not
Okay.
officially would need to be wider to be called a multi-purpose, like 10 feet. And we're not
Okay.
going to do that. There's just not enough right of way.
Right.
So can I just ask, we have the 1.2 million, if we don't,
1.25,
oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, 1.25 million. If we don't get the additional grant monies, then what,
The village will look for other grants to help pay for this improvement to complete it.
okay, so we just kind of hold until we find some grant money to complete it? Okay, thanks.
That would be staff's recommendation. So,
Okay.
Is there anyone online who has comment regarding this?
I think we just lost our
Ah,
only attendee virtually.
okay.
That's a non-staff member, I should clarify.
And one other question, Drew, does that 1.25 million, is there like a time frame on that we have to use it by?
It was a appropriation that Senator Julie Morrison got from
Right,
the
right,
village.
right.
It's being run through Department of, it's DECIO, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. They just sent us, we had a conversation with them about this. It's really gonna be a construction grant. They just sent us those documents. We haven't had a chance to analyze them in terms of, yes is the answer, but I will say those can get drawn out.
Okay.
As a reminder, the village's grant that we utilized to build the Robert McClory was originally awarded, I think, in 2013.
Wow.
Got it done last year.
Grant was suspended by IDOT by the state for an extended period of time, got reinstated, and so it's, with
Okay.
reason, these things, and I will tell you in advance, because this involves a railroad, this will take a long time. So,
Thanks.
yep.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions, it's a roll call vote. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Rappin,
Aye.
trustee Ryder,
Aye.
trustee Brand,
Aye.
trustee Inkman,
Aye.
trustee Markey.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Agenda item 13, which is the second reading of an ordinance amending the first year of the biennial budget of the Village of Lake Bluff for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2022, and ending April 30th, 2023. In order to align expenses with amounts noted in the first year of the multi-year budget, staff recommends following past practice to revise the first year of the FY 2023 biennial budget in the amount of $323,295. These are all expenditure rollovers or adjustments, and this includes the following expenses. First is an FY '22 rollover cost associated with the purchase of 2 police vehicles, referencing resolution number 2021-51, which authorized the original purchases. However, the orders were completed in FY '23. Secondly, a FEMA firefighters grant, EMW-2020-FG-11506, which was received and funds the purchase of 33 self-contained breathing apparatus in the amount of $220,680.25, which was received. This is one-time additional revenue that offsets an unbudgeted expense. And then finally, emergent repair expenses of $15,000 related to water main breaks. We anticipate future amendments related to the rollover costs associated with the path repaving project, the East Scranton Avenue streetscape and paving improvement project, and also the Green Bay Road / West Washington pedestrian crossing project. And all these projects were budgeted for in FY 2022 and will be included in future quarterly budget amendment process. So again, we're doing this on a more cyclical, regular, quarterly basis so that we can bring the budget in line. Funds are available to effectuate these expense modifications from sources other than the tax levy, and the village board approved the first reading at its reading on September 12th. Do I have a motion regarding agenda item 13?
So moved.
Thank you, trustee Marquis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Rappin. This is a roll call vote. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Trustee Briand.
Aye.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Trustee Marquis.
Aye.
Trustee Rappin.
Aye.
Trustee Ryder.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we have the trustees' report. If we have any trustees who would like to make a report this evening. Hearing none. Do we have an executive session or no?
Only if you need to talk about the executive session minutes. If there's not,
Okay.
not any comments or concerns, then you can approve them in open.
All right, so I would like consideration of the September 12th executive session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, trustee Ryder. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Briand. Are there any corrections, comments regarding the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Should do a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
That was
That
how
was-
I understood what
which
trustee
I didn't-
Ryder made and
Yes, and I
seconded
didn't-
by trustee Briand.
I didn't
Yes,
say that as,
Sorry, some
so
villages say
eloquently
consideration
put.
and some
Yes,
don't.
that was very eloquently put. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. There will be no executive session, so I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Before we adjourn, I just want to thank trustee Briand for all of your work. You've been awesome. Learned a lot just from watching you work. So thank you and best of luck down south.
In the 4-5.
And the 4-5.
Thank you.
We will miss you.
I appreciate that. I wasn't going to say anything because I wasn't sure I'd be able to, but it's been a privilege.
I really appreciate it. Thanks. Congrats.
We will undoubtedly miss your wit and wisdom.
No, my cultural references will,
Some of it goes, sorry about that.
that's okay.
All right, so we had a motion to adjourn, is that right? Yes.
I don't know if I have a second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh,
we
that's
go.
awesome that
Final act.
trustee Briand does that. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's it. Good night.
Thank you.
We're adjourned. Oh, I appreciate it so much, so much.